continues to plead, and Jesus tells her, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Dogs is a derogatory name for Gentiles, not dissimilar to the word kafir or nigger. And she responds, sir, even the dogs eat the children's crumbs from under the table. Now the dominant metaphor in this exchange is that of the household. Jesus is within the household of Judaism, looking after its children. The woman, the juster, is outside the house. She is a foreigner, a Gentile. Jesus is an insider, she is an outsider. The insiders are called children, the outsiders are called dogs. The outsider wants something from the insider, and the insider doesn't want to share it. Time and again throughout history, conflict has risen between religious insiders and those who are outside. The church wants to maintain its boundaries, determining what's right and wrong, and only granting admittance on its own terms. The church claims divine approval for its borders, divine approval for its power to determine what's holy and what's not, and its power to admit outsiders or not. It's a formidable institution when you have God riding shotgun. But time and again, someone little, someone insignificant, someone different, maybe a different race, class, gender, marital status, someone brave and foolish, comes to challenge the institution's boundaries. Please, sir, I'm in love and want to get married. I don't want to hurt anyone, or hurt their marriages, or make a fuss, even in the slightest way. I just want to marry the woman I love, here in church, before God. Oh, in case you haven't noticed, I'm a woman too. St. Matthew's has had 4 such requests already. The outsiders, the so-called dogs in the story, want some crumbs from the children's table. What would Jesus do? In the world of male honor, Justa bests Jesus in this argument. And by losing to a woman, he is shamed. Yet in the eyes of the early faith communities, Jesus manifests the greater virtue of hospitality by responding positively to the challenge, to open wide the doors of his metaphor. So Justa brings the words to the words house and children. She brings the words table and food. And it was the table and food that was the primary site of conflict in the early church. As Luke Timothy Johnson, the Catholic scholar, says, we're obsessed today by the sexual dimension of the body. First century Mediterranean world was obsessed by the social implications of food and table fellowship. To let the dogs into the house of Judaism was unscriptural, ritually unhygienic, and contrary to culture. And interestingly, if you read and you find the Family First website against same-gender marriage, they're also arguing scripture, bodily boundaries, and culture. So Justa the Gentile takes the household metaphor of eating and widens it in order that both children and dogs are fed from the same table. She believes that the table of faith in the God of Jesus can sustain both Jews and Gentiles. Jesus, for his part, opens his mind to a truth. Jesus does the most difficult thing for those of us born into privilege. He listens, and then he allows himself to be fundamentally changed. Hospitality requires more than simply inviting others to dine with us. It requires us to accept that others, the so-called foreigners, may never believe or act exactly the same as us. Therefore, the table we will sit at together will feel less like our table. The table, though familiar, will now feel somewhat strange and foreign. And this is how I suspect many traditionalists are feeling about the possibility of marriage being shared with gay and lesbian couples. It feels a little strange, a little foreign. Contrary to the accepted understanding of Torah, that's the first 5 books of the Bible, Jesus would preach and live out a table fellowship where pure and impure, male and female, Jew and Gentile, insiders and outsiders would dine together. Not always comfortably, often very uncomfortably, but together. The book of Acts, written by Luke, is an account of the emergence and spread of the early church following Jesus' death. Chapter 10 is pivotal. Until chapter 10, the message about Jesus had been preached only to Jews. Admittedly, some who were on the edge, like the sexually other Ethiopian, some detested Samaritans, but it's still firmly within the Jewish house. It's not a religion for those Gentiles. In chapter 10, however, Peter moves ethnically and thus religiously to the edge, and he takes a dangerous step across a threshold that would demand the most fundamental reinterpretation for the emergent church. Well, Peter falls into a deep sleep, and he sees a large sheep coming down from heaven, and in it all manner of animals, clean and unclean. The ones a Jew could eat and the ones a Jew couldn't eat. And then he hears a voice, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Not a vegetarian. And Peter said, "By no means, I have never eaten anything unclean." And then the voice says to Peter, "What God has made clean, you must not call unclean." And Luke Timothy Johnson again writes, "Please remember the stakes. The Gentiles were considered by nature unclean, and were by practice polluted by idolatry. The decision to let the Gentiles in as is, not requiring their conversion to Judaism, came into direct conflict with the accepted interpretation of Torah and what God wanted for humans. Peter's vision leads him to respond to an invitation to an intimate fellowship with an impure Gentile's household, Cornelius's, whom he baptizes once he sees evidence of God at work among them. Peter then has the problem of justifying his actions to his colleagues in Jerusalem, Parnell Central, on the phone. And again, we can see parallels with where we are today regarding the inclusion of gay and lesbian people in today's church. There are many who are uncomfortable with the foreign nature of same-gender love and its expressions, and use the Bible to support their discomfort. There are those who want to make inclusion conditional on sexual abstinence. This is the position of the English bishops. Be more like us, is the message, before we make room for you. Luke, in his Gospel, doesn't represent Jesus as having dismissed the issue of food purity. To the contrary, he presents the early disciples as keeping to a very high standard of purity. Thus, the addition of true Gentiles to the community created a serious problem about the relationship of believers to one another in terms of the purity of their food. Luke acknowledges the seriousness of the problem by repeating the incident in full in chapter 11 of Acts. If the Jerusalem Council found in favour of Peter with Cornelius' household, then faithful Jewish Christians would inevitably be compromised. There was no win-win solution coming down the tracks. And the deck is stacked against Peter. Scripture is against him. Scripture, as Peter understands it, opposes his action. The book of Deuteronomy is clear. It does not permit the people of God to mix with foreigners. Tradition is against him. The Maccabean wars against foreign influences are in people's recent memory. The only argument in his favour is that something experientially remarkable happened. Experientially remarkable about the work of Jesus happened in these people's lives, in Cornelius' household. And to their great credit, the Jerusalem Council, the Parnell Center, knew the spirit of Jesus well enough to discern that God was doing a new thing and gave their blessing. Likewise, God is doing a new thing in these days. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the acceptance of gay and lesbian people and their relationships grows daily. And similarly in the church. It might seem fragile, might seem reliant on the goodwill of the majority, but there are continuing signs of hope. I pray that the church will welcome and embrace this wind, this ruach of change, and celebrate the hope that it offers to us all.